As far as introductions go, my name is Chief Ryan Paul. I've been with as a career fire chief for 7 years. I've been with the fire department. I served as a volunteer for 15, so about 22 years or so with the City of Pierre Fire Department. Prior to that, I worked for the state as the state risk manager under the BOA for a number of years there as well. And then Twyla, if you would introduce yourself.
Twyla Height, the finance officer for the City of Pierre.
Ed Elberson, the building official with the City of Pierre.
And just a couple other city officials that are in the room, so you know who's all in here. We do have Captain Walls with the Pierre Police Department sitting over here. Right in front of Captain Walls is the City Administrator, Christy Honeywell. And then right over here in the front, to my right, to your left, is Commissioner Vanna Johnson with the Pierre City Commission. So we'll go ahead and get started today. Today we're going to take the opportunity to provide some information to you guys and the community as much as we can on a proposed new program that we're setting out. It's our goal today to provide you with this information on the program and give you some guidance and show you the mechanics of how the program is going to look. The other piece of this meeting is we want to make sure we're not overlooking something. Right now, this is a proposal in front of the City Commission, but we want to make sure we're not really missing too much here. So we want to make sure we get this right. This is new to us. We modeled this after other communities. We put it together. We put it in front of the City Commission. But we modeled after other communities. So we want to make sure we do this right. This is new to us as it is to you. So that's where we're at going forward. I do want to be clear on something though. Yesterday we had some disruptive actions going on. There's actually people here that want to hear the program, how it works and everything. So we're going to try to hold all questions off until we get through the presentation, and then we'll take questions. We got derailed a few times yesterday throughout the program, some disruptive actions. So we want to try to hold that off and take the questions after the fact, so there's the people that are here that want to learn about the program can learn about the program, and then after the fact we will take questions, and there's all the city staff will be here after the fact as well, and stick around if you want to catch them and talk to them one-on-one directly as well. So with that being said, we'll go ahead and get started. Again, this program is a proposed program for the City of Pierre. It affects obviously everybody in this room, whether you're a tenant, whether you're a land owner or an agent or a manager or whatever the case is, you probably have some type of stake inside this program, and that's why you're here today. A little bit of history on this program. You know, we put together a committee a number of years ago, I think about 3 years ago, and we modeled the program after existing communities. But what we did is we looked at the other communities, what they had in place, because we were seeing some things come into the building official office. We were seeing things come through my response as a firefighter out there in the community where we were seeing some issues with fire alarms and structural issues and things along those lines, electrical issues and things along those lines. So that's kind of where some of this came from as we put this program forward. And like I said, we looked at other communities, and that's where we were at today. The committee did see somewhat of a benefit for that. They appear that it would be a benefit for our community to have something in place here. So that's what we did. We put together a program for the commission to take a look at, and they make the determination if they want to take action on this program. So what it is, so they put together a committee, or the committee developed a program to inspect residential rental units for a base standard life safety, a base standard. We're talking fire alarms, we're talking egress, and things along those lines, for a base standard of life safety, which includes only non-owner occupied dwelling rentals. If you live there and you rent out a rental, it doesn't go over to that. It's just for non-owner occupied dwelling rentals. There's a draft ordinance of how the program will look, and it's included in your handout, so hopefully you grab that. I think it's the white pages that are out there, so hopefully you have that, because we will be referring to that shortly into the presentation. We're also looking at partnering with Pierre Housing and the Redevelopment Commission on the inspection portion of this piece. They served on the committee. They came onto the committee at some point while we were putting this together, as they have experience in inspections. Their inspection process looks different than what we're proposing. We're proposing a base standard of life safety. I think their inspection process is a little bit more in depth. If you're familiar, if anybody works with Section 8 housing, it's different than what we're proposing here. But they have some experience in that, and they are on board if the program is approved through the City Commission to assist with the inspection portion of that. We also have a link, if you have not been out on the City of Pierre website, we have a link out there. That link talks about different things with the program, whether it's the application process, the licensing, the ordinances, the inspection schedule, all of those things, I think some of the fees. And as we get frequently asked questions, we're adding that to the website as well. So we're trying to keep that updated as much as we can. One thing I will add to this, and one of the questions that came up is the timeline of going to the next step, to the public hearing at the City Commission. The mayor did mention that he is pushing that timeline back, and we're looking at a target date of July 27th, which is that Tuesday night commission. So if you're interested in that target, and that's a moving date, if the commission feels that it needs more time for everyone to digest the program and for them to digest the program and provide feedback, that target date can be pushed back even further at the commission and the mayor's blessing, and that's how that process works. But at this time, if you guys were here yesterday, we were talking about Tuesday as a target date. That date is no longer a target date for a public hearing. It's pushed back. That way it has time for all the commissioners to get your feedback on what you think about the program, whether it's your likes or dislikes, and then they can digest what your feedback is, and then they can make their informed choice on how you guys feel about the program as well. So with that being said, and if that target date changes, I mean, it'll be out in the media and stuff. That'll get out there when it becomes a public hearing, and the media will pick it up. So, but that is a target date of now July 27th, just so you're informed of that as well. I'm going to talk just a little bit about the draft ordinances that we have in place. I'm going to highlight these ordinances. I'm not going to go over them in detail. I'm going to highlight some of the key aspects, and what it does is it gives you an opportunity so you know how to navigate these if you need to go back on the website or in your handouts. Now, given these are a draft ordinance, so as things change and move, as we move through this program, some of the things might change in the ordinance. We don't expect a lot at this time unless the commission gives us direction to do something along those lines, maybe before the public hearing, based on some comments or whatever the case that might come from the stakeholders in the program out in the community. So getting into the ordinance itself, and then I'll kick it over to Twyla after that, and then over to Matt after that. Then we'll open it up to questions for the group. But getting into the ordinance itself, we're just gonna, it's just drafted just like any other city ordinance. If you're familiar with the city ordinances, the first piece we talk about the definitions. All of this is gonna fall underneath Chapter 10, Article 23 within the City of Pierre ordinances. The first piece is definitions. It's just that. It defines a dwelling rental unit. It defines a housing inspector, an owner, a manager, an agent. It defines that stuff. So if you have questions on what that means, you might find your answer in the definitions on how things are defined in this ordinance. The next piece is the exception. Without getting too deep into that, that basically says if it's a short-term stay facility, like a motel or stuff, it doesn't fall into this. They're already being inspected, a lot of those folks, in other means such as the state or whatever the case is. So that exception piece under 102 is exempts those with short-term stay units. Section 23 or 10-23-103, agent required. That we did have some questions on that one, and I'll try to just highlight a few of those things, and I'll read off just the first line here. Each owner of a leased dwelling unit who does not reside within 50 miles of the City of Pierre shall appoint an agent that is located within 50 miles of the City of Pierre. What does that mean? Well, Pierre Housing Redevelopment Commission, who's going to be doing the inspections, has to have someone somewhat local to contact to make that inspection process work. So they need, when you do the registration, when Carla talks about the registration, there's a spot on there. You can identify an agent. It can be yourself. It can be a manager. It can be a company. It can be a best friend. It can be a tenant. It can be whatever you want it to be. We just need a local contact. So when they get in there and someone close that we can get in there and visit with, and because I know some people own properties, they don't even live in the state. So it just makes it a little bit convenient for everyone on that regards. And that's what 103 is referring to. Just have to have somebody, a contact person for Pierre Housing to visit with, to get the process started on the inspection piece. License of dwelling units, Twyla's gonna talk more about that. I'll just read the first line. Basically what it says is, if this program is adopted by the city commission, then it's just saying that if you have a licensing, or if you have a dwelling rental unit, you will have to have it licensed, and which Twyla will visit with on how that process will work as well, along with the fees and applications she will talk about. Implementation, what this is saying here is, just take some time to get out. So basically, if this program is adopted, and during the implementation phase of this program, it's gonna take some time to roll it out. We'll probably be learning a few things if it is adopted on how it's gonna work. It's gonna take some time to roll out. So just because so-and-so has a dwelling rental, but it hasn't been inspected, nothing's gonna change. You're still gonna be able to rent it. It might take a few years to get out and actually get inspection started in some of these properties. Until we see what's coming in through the licensing program, we're not even 100% sure how much is out there yet. We have an idea based on utilities, but it might be years. So if you have a rental out there, and if you think, well, they adopted the program today, they're gonna be in my unit tomorrow inspecting, that's not the case. It might take a few years before we even get to you and contact you to start that process. Just because of it's a new program, as we grow into and establish our roots, and then get something set up over time. The next section here is transfer of dwelling unit license. Basically what this says is, if you sell your rental property, your license that you have for that rental property does not transfer over to the new owner. Basically it just states they need to just go to the city, go to the webpage and sign up and get listed as the owner and select their agent for that property. Expiration, basically what that says is that's talking about the expiration of the license once it is issued, if this program is adopted. What that means is, if you sign up in 2021, that means you're signed up, if you register in 2021, that means you're licensed for 2022, from January 1 to December 31. So that just talks about at the end of December 31, it's an annual license. You would need to go back in and do your license again. Section 109, and get back. Section 109, inspection required. I'm gonna read a little bit out of this here, and then Matt's gonna actually go in at the end, the building official's gonna go into that a little bit deeper as well towards the end of this presentation. But basically what this reads is, upon receipt of the initial application for a dwelling unit rental license, the housing inspector or their authorized representative shall schedule within a reasonable time frame an inspection of the dwelling unit to be licensed to determine if the dwelling unit complies with the property maintenance code, which is already in place. The property maintenance code is already a standard that you have to meet within the city of Pierre. And that's what that's saying. And it goes on to say that most places will likely never be inspected more than once every 5 years. And that's the rotation we're looking at. Now, if additional inspections are required based on some significant hazardous conditions or something that we've seen as a result of a fire, or if law enforcement had to make entry for whatever reason and seen some hazardous living conditions, there might be a follow-up inspection or something along those lines. But that's how that process will work for the additional inspection requirements. And then the next few sections here are just existing language that we moved from part of the ordinances that are already there over to this piece here. And I'm not gonna get into that portion right now, but what I will do is I'm gonna kick it over to Twyla. Twyla's gonna talk about the registration of how you as a owner would register for the program, and I think you're gonna go online and show that. I'll give that to you. And how that process looks online, so you're familiar with what the process looks online, and then the licensing piece and maybe some fees associated with it. So with that, Twyla, I'm going to step aside and let you go.
All right, so that's just a copy of the ordinance that Ian was referencing there. The licensing portion, the 104, the fees and application forms, and in 105, and then the implementation in 106. So the city recently implemented an online platform that we utilize for all of our business licenses, and that's what we'll utilize for this as well. So it'll be an online platform that will require a registration, which is a login and password, and then it'll keep all your profile information, and that's what it'll use to put that information into your application when you go to actually do the license application. And then when we do the renewals, that information will be residual. It'll stay in there other than updates each year when you go in to make any changes, if you have changes to the mailing addresses, contact information, or the agents that have been assigned. So all of that information will be handled, managed, and everything through the online platform. This platform is in existence right now. We utilize it for the building department. We have a code enforcement piece, and the business licensing, as I mentioned, is already being handled through this website. So that's already out there. You can find it through the cityofpier.org, and then go through, you can find it either through the building department or the finance page. And that process will, as Ian had mentioned, the registration part, when you register, you'll be in a registration status until either the inspection has been identified and completed, or you've been identified as not needing an inspection for that year. So if we don't have you flagged for an inspection, your license will just be issued. If an inspection is established for that next year, then you'll be in a registration status until that inspection is completed. So our plan is to, after we have the population of all the registrations, we will choose our sample of the inspections, and those will be completed over the next 12 months. So that January through December is when those inspections would be completed, and then as those are completed, those licenses will be issued. And that's, you'll be in that registration status until the license is issued. And all that information will be housed online, and the forms and everything are issued through there, and that's how that'll be handled. And then the information that Ian had mentioned regarding the handouts that were in the back and the webpage that's out there. So when you go to the cityofpier.org, at the very bottom of the page on the left, you'll find that dwelling rental program link. It does have the information, for the most part, that was on the postcard that you received, and then there's also links to the draft application, the inspection checklist, which was provided, and the draft ordinance. So those documents are out there in case you lose your handout or you want to refer to it again. And again, the frequently asked questions, we'll continue to update that as we have more information come throughout the public meetings. So we do have today's meeting and another one scheduled for Monday at 5:30, and that'll complete that portion of the process. And as Ian had mentioned, a public hearing will be scheduled at the City Commission, which currently is tentatively July 27th. And that'll be, we'll notice that as a public hearing, and there'll be a public notice posted in the paper, and it'll run through the commission under the consent calendar to set that hearing when we get to that point. So with that, I think I'll turn it over to Matt for the inspection piece.
Okay, so the inspections are gonna be based on the property maintenance code and the standards that are inherent in there. So basically, we're looking for address identification, to make sure there's a house number out front, you know, the individual apartments are numbered, so that way emergency personnel, if they have to respond, they can find a place and get there. We wanna make sure that there's a kitchen, it's functional, that the people have a place to cook and prepare their meals, that the bedrooms are there, you know, except for, of course, efficiencies, which might be just a one room type of deal. You know, that the bedroom has smoke detectors, has egress windows, you know, that there's a bathroom, a place where people can take showers or baths. It doesn't have to be a tub, it could be a stand-up shower. We wanna make sure the place is clean. We're looking for rubbish and garbage and make sure that's taken care of, that there's a place for people to put their trash. Broken or missing windows, we wanna make sure that the building envelope is complete so they can close the windows and not have the rain and wind blow in their house. Visible structural issues, we wanna make sure that there's no signs of structural deficiencies, no roofs that are leaking, no decks that are pulling away from the house, you know, stairs that are in danger of falling apart. We wanna make sure that there's a safe place and nothing's gonna fall apart. Pest infestation, we wanna make sure that, you know, that there's no rodents or bugs. Flaking or peeling paint, you know, typically on the exterior, the flaking or peeling paint can lead to the deterioration of the exterior sidings. And on the interior paint, you know, one of the big issues that we see is that for a lot of older housing, there's a lot of lead-based paint that's still present in houses. And as that paint flakes and peels away, it can be eaten by kids. Apparently lead has a sweet taste, and kids can tend to eat it. So if you can encapsulate that, you know, current fresh paint, that'll help keep that down. Washing machine plumbing and dryer venting, we wanna make sure that, you know, one of the things we don't like to see is flex duct, because it gives lint a place to collect, and lint is a very great fire starter. So that's one of the reasons why we don't want to see flex duct, and we want to see proper dryer venting. ceiling and wall conditions, we would just wanna make sure that everything is in good order, it's clean, that there's nothing falling apart, no holes in the ceiling, holes in walls. Electrical hazards, we wanna make sure that the lighting's in good condition, that the outlets work. We've been in places where there's only one outlet that works and they've gotta run extension cords from here to there. We don't wanna see that. Is there a clear exit path in case of emergency? Wanna make sure that the house isn't, sometimes these can be tenant issues, but anyway, we wanna make sure that people can get out, that they're not trapped or blocked into any part of the house. Plumbing leaks, plumbing leaks can cause serious structural issues. We wanna make sure that the plumbing is in sound condition and not leaking. Hot and cold water, proper egress, like I said, you need to have a front door that's functioning, egress windows in the sleeping areas. A permanent source of heat, we don't wanna see space heaters used as the only means of heat in a residence. Portable fire extinguishers in common areas, that's typical for apartment buildings, it's not something we would look at in, say, a house. And then also for apartments, emergency exit signage and lighting, so when they have to get out of the place, that they know where to go, they can see the signs and that the lighting is present. Guardrails and handrails where they need to be, handrails, 4 or more risers need the handrails, and anything more than 30 inches needs a guardrail. You wanna make sure that the smoke detectors and carbon monoxide detectors are working and they're in the proper locations, and so you need a smoke detector in each bedroom, and outside the bedroom in the hallway, and at least one on every floor of a building, the residence. And those are kind of the basic things that we're looking for in terms of the inspection. If you have an older building, but everything is still functional, we're not gonna say you have to make any upgrades. Unless something is manifestly unsafe. So, if you got a sleeping room that doesn't have an egress window, that's not gonna be allowed to be used as a sleeping room. So oftentimes these can be stuck in basements and places with not proper egress. And so what happens is the person down there, not only are they trapped in, they can't get out, the fire and rescue teams that may have to come in, they can't get in either. So essentially that's the pieces of the inspection that we'll be looking for.
So, thanks Matt and Twyla for that piece.
I forgot to add, when I went through the actual licensing and application process, will require a $20 per structure fee and a $50 per unit. So that will, 15, what did I say? $15 per unit, and $20 per structure. So that will be the licensing fee that's required annually with the licensing and registration process.
So what that means is if you have a 10-unit apartment complex, it would be $20 for the unit and $50 per, or the structure, $50 per unit. It'd be a total of $170, if I do the math right. And so that breaks down to per unit less than $3 a month is kind of how that plays out. So, but those are the fees, not to make a lot of money here, but to help pay for the program, obviously. So with that being said, and with the presentation here, again, our job as the folks up in front of you today is to share this information with you to make you more informed about the program. We're gonna take questions here in a second, but then you guys take this information and digest it and then visit. If you have questions, if you have likes or dislikes, this is in front of the commission, and that's where you should share those likes and dislikes if you wanna have your voices heard. The public hearing is a good place to do that. The cityofpierre.org, there's some email addresses for commission members if you wanna do that. But that's the better place to share your likes and dislikes, because that's who needs to hear your thoughts on this program. But with that being said, does anybody have any questions on what's been presented up here and how this program is gonna lay out? Yes, sir.
I have a comment. I'm a contractor, and I've been in and out of a lot of apartment buildings and a lot of by far, the homes that need inspection are private, not apartment buildings. If this is to go in effect, it should be for every building in the city, in my opinion.
All right, thank you for that. Question?
If the fees, say we pay the fee for the inspection and it's all taken care of like in April, we sell in July, does he have to pay the same fee again, so he's getting double hit? I don't see any benefit to the landowners in what you're proposing. I do see a benefit to the city.
So what you're saying, if you
So
sold
what
your
I'm
property
asking
and
is, how
somebody-
does that benefit, the people that own apartments? This proposal?
How does this proposal benefit people? that own
Yes, how does
apartments?
it benefit?
Well, you can take it, I mean, you can take it how you wanna take it. We're looking at making, safer living conditions in the city of Pierre and trying to do it with the least amount of expense that there is. And I know, you can argue this all day long till we're blue in the face. But, you know, I had somebody approach me today about this, it's a landlord, and he said, you know, I gave my tenant, smoke detectors, he took them down. We know that's a reoccurring problem, that's an issue. And, you know, we're not gonna come back and we're not gonna throw a fine on you because, I mean, we're not gonna come in and say, oh, you don't miss a smoke detector, fine. It doesn't work like that, it's the working with you to try to solve the issues and giving a reasonable time frame to solve the issues. But, you know, what I told this individual, and you can take it how you want, but, you know, you can tell this tenant, you know, listen, the city's got this new program, and if they come in here and I'm gonna get, you know, cited for something, this is gonna fall back on you. If I end up getting a fine for being non-compliant because of your actions, I'm gonna pass this back on you, or whatever the case is. You can take it however you want, and you can twist it, but there are benefits out there, for the tenant and I believe for the owner as well, so. Yes,
I'm standing up so people can hear me. First of all, on that last comment, just you're not gonna find us for people taking out smoke detectors, which I've experienced, I'm sure a lot of the other ones have too. And that's a trust me thing, and trust me if I don't have a whole lot of trust that, the government's gonna be all that favorable to the landlords. But my original question is this, I saw you quoted, it said you had no more rental unit structural fires lately, and that's led to questions and et cetera. Okay, one of the last big apartment fires was Edgewater, right?
right.
My understanding of that fire, these inspections, none of this would have helped that one iota. And I don't know where all the questions coming or where the big push is, other than perhaps the fire department for getting this done. So I wanna know, why do we need this?
So I'm not gonna get into individual fires for property owners maybe in here, but I can tell you certain fires that we've had within the city of Pierre with non-working smoke alarm, time of day would have made a large difference. It would have been overnight sleeping hours, could have been tragic outcomes versus some of the outcomes. We've been lucky enough, we haven't had a tragic outcome on those fires. So what was your second part of the question?
Well, first of all, that part, as far as responding to that, if they're gonna take them down, what good is it gonna do anyway?
And what's the second part of the question?
I'm just saying, where's the big push for this?
Well, it's just coming from things that we've seen in the building official with law enforcement going out in these locations where they're a little bit more than we are.
So
And that's where it's coming from.
So you're not, it's not from a desire of the general public or the city of Pierre, it's from city officials.
And we've gotten calls from tenants and, yep, and let me tell you this, so if you have a, and again, I don't wanna get in this back and forth here, but when you have a situation where, and I'm just gonna use it on a personal basis, as a fire chief, I have 64 volunteer firefighters, and when we have to get dispatched and we have to respond to a complex, and we have maybe somebody trapped, where we're pulling off the second floor, we're having to make entry into a building that we typically wouldn't make entry because somebody is in there, either because of an egress may be blocked, or because there wasn't working smoke detectors and they weren't alerted to the fire. I am putting myself or my members more at risk than they need to be because those things were not in place. So on my side of things, that's what we're looking at. I don't know if Matt, if you can, on the building official side of things that you see from general complaints coming in, but on my side of things, that's where we see, and I can tell you that my members will say the same thing when they have to go do that. So, you have a question back here?
Percentage-wise, how many fires do you respond to that are actual residential fires, and how many is actual rental property fires? Is there much of a difference? And if there isn't, why doesn't this implement to all residents too, to make sure that safety and precautions are made for residents? And they have to pay the fee too.
So you're saying not just for the rental units, but you're saying for the privately owned dwellings as well?
Right, and
Yeah.
how much, you know, the fire department and so forth, I can understand their situation.
Yeah.
But I'm asking
Typically, the
why,
private property owners choices to maintain their property doesn't affect a large condensed area of other property or other residents. So, you know, in the case of a single family home that catches on fire, they are not necessarily, possibly if the home next door is very close, but other than that, they don't have an impact on the density based on what an apartment complex can do.
But
So-
if that rental unit is an individual house, we're talking apples to apples, right?
Again, then it comes back to the property owner's responsibility to maintain that property, and the tenant that's living there doesn't have that responsibility.
So why are individual houses included in this ordinance
Right,
then?
exactly.
As far as rental houses?
Yeah,
So that is something.
if that's what she's stating, I mean,
Because they're not owner occupied, so that's the definition that's in there, is the not owner occupied.
That seems like you're picking on the property owners. I own some properties in town, and I feel like that I'm being picked on here because I take care of them. You come in, you say, I got chip paint inside and outside the house, I got to paint it. I said, that's bullshit. You shouldn't have to come in and tell me that I have to paint my house. I take care of them in a reasonable manner, but I don't need somebody telling me I need to paint
So I
my.
made a comment on yours. So just so you know, when we get questions, certain questions, I do log them and I will share them with other folks as well. Like I said, we're here to learn about the program and try to answer the questions the best that we can. It's new to us as well. We haven't got into the program. So when I hear a question such as that, we certainly will pass some of that on as well. So, Guy?
And this program will only be implemented if it's passed by the city council.
So, yeah, so the city commission, so the question was, if you didn't hear it, when is this program gonna be implemented? What we're here today, again, is just to share with you how the program looks in the ordinance. This is for you to digest this information and take it to the public hearing at the city commission and express your likes or dislikes. You can contact them via email or whatever means you wanna contact with them through the process there as well. We do have a commissioner here if you wanna catch her afterwards as well.
Like to, but, may I respond to some of the?
Yeah,
things
go
that
ahead.
come up already?
Commissioner
So,
Johnson.
Bonnie Johnson, in case anybody missed my name. You guys, this is about safety. I mean, the bottom line, this is about safety. We have tenants that are living in units that are not safe. And somebody's like, well, so the contractors that are in there, they can just, you know, they'll report it. Are you kidding me? Who here is a contractor? How long do you think you would be in business if you reported every apartment? I mean, the owners aren't gonna call you anymore. You're gonna be out of business within a month. You can't take that
Yeah,
responsibility
but it
on.
goes right back to the fact that more of the owner occupied houses need attention than apartment
And
houses.
I can't disagree with that, but to me, the difference is that it's owner occupied. The owner makes that choice, that that's how they want to live. That's their choice. But when a tenant moves in, they don't have the choices that the owners do. They're afraid to call.
They
don't have to move in.
Maybe I speak for some of these other tenant owners, but they're not shy about calling.
Some are.
Some, geez, every one of mine are.
Okay,
And
well,
it's like, I may call about some of the piddliest stuff, any major, you're gonna get my phone run off the hook. So I don't think there's any shyness on the tenant's part to call about any issues they perceive as problematic, hazardous, or whatever. So I don't think you're talking about some poor lemmings that don't know what they're doing here.
well, there are some, and I will, just a couple of examples. We've been into units where, like was referred to earlier, the light in the unit was literally a light bulb hanging from the ceiling. To turn the light on, they had to screw and unscrew the light bulb. It was
Then
through
go
an
after
electric
those
cord
tenants, go
plugged
after
into the
those
next
landlords.
apartment. So that's one example.
They're
Another
out
example,
there, I
there was
know
a
they
young
are.
person that was in the unit, the kitchen sink didn't work. She was washing her baby's bottoms in the bathtub. Do you guys want
Doesn't
your
the
daughter
free
to
market
do that?
decide that she could move, people could move out?
But here's the thing is she was 15 years old. She didn't know her rights. She didn't know what, it costs hundreds of dollars to move. You guys, it's easy for you to just pick up and move somewhere, but some of these people.
It's not
don't have
easy to
those
move.
options. It's not easy to move.
And it's not easy for us to fix
So
these
let me-
up after people
I would
move
like
out.
I would like to respond
not
to
easy to
the
throw
question
stuff
that
away
Connie
when you
had
move
a
out.
minute ago about how does it benefit the landlord? And I believe that this empowers you as landlords. You can, I've already talked to somebody who is
It's
a
already covered
landlord.
under our lease agreements to kick them out if they do these things, so.
Exactly, and that's
So
my
what-
point.
So this doesn't help us any.
Sure it does.
No, it doesn't, that's ridiculous.
And you guys are always talking about affordable housing, and Pierre, what do you think this is
Right.
gonna do to affordable housing?
It's gonna increase
It's gonna be
costs.
non-existent.
So
I'm
do you,
just
so
saying.
are you saying that it's okay that?
No,
you
I'm
live
not,
in
and I don't,
housing
and I
that's
don't,
not-
and I got some and I don't do that. I fix my stuff up.
Well, and
But
I
you need to
appreciate
go
that.
after
Thank
the
you.
bad actors.
So how do we know
everyone.
who the bad actors are if we're not in the units?
Well, the
You
ones
guys
that are
gotta
complaining.
complain, yeah.
Drive up the street and see who the bad actor is. You know,
You drive
by
around
looking out the
town, you
window of
can
your
see 'em.
car.
Respond to the ones that you get a
Which
phone
units
call
you
to,
work.
and
But that's
go
the point,
inspect
is
that.
we have condemned rental housing, that we never got the phone call from the tenants. They didn't know that it wasn't safe, they didn't know that that was a right. But again, let me respond to the question that I was trying to respond to, as far as, you could take that and make that an addendum to your lease. And then when you have a problem, you know, somebody was like, man, I've been taken advantage. You guys have power to do things that you just have to do it. You can evict people that aren't following leases and things like that. And it's harder to do if it's not in your lease. Yes,
Do you know how hard it is to evict somebody and how
I
much
do.
it costs?
I do.
You've been through it?
I went
And you
for the
don't get
housing
any rent
authority
for it
30
while
years.
you are evicting them, did you realize that?
I'm sorry?
You don't get any compensation, it's while
But you can put, lien is not the right word, but you can file a judgment against them and eventually.
How do you get that? I've gotten lots of judgments out there.
How do you get a judgment?
How they tear your property.
Do you have any rentals?
I do not personally know, no.
Does South Dakota Housing?
You're speaking from inexperience.
That's what we need, is to get the law.
Hey, let's try to get everybody back on track here real quick, so we're getting some side conversation, if you don't mind, but I did see another question.
Yeah, I was just wondering, on smoke detectors, are the 10-year ones that you can buy at Menards, are those acceptable or?
They are,
No?
and those are UL approved,
Yep.
and those are acceptable, and I can tell you that that's what we issue to, folks that need them. We get them through the Red Cross, as a free program for them to give to folks in the community that can't afford them. But, we're seeing that they can't take the battery out, and they're good for 10 years.
And I think there is a really serious issue, I had one rental recently, the guy had taken all the batteries.
It's a constant problem. We've seen it all the time.
That's not a cure-all, because
I know
they'll
it's
take the
not a
whole
cure.
unit out.
Yeah, if you got a smoker in there, you know, they're not supposed to be smoking, they're gonna pull it out. I get it, but we're not coming in here to slap your hands on that, and all that by
It's
any
a way
means. Just-
to check it.
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know, and-
Cause you're making a reasonable effort, and I get that you're not always gonna have folks that are tenants that are complying with all of that as well, so.
And aren't egress windows already required by state? code
Everything.
or
All of this
whatever?
is.
Everything.
This is just a mechanism
But
to
we're-
enforce what's already.
Aren't you grandfathered in? I've got a couple of basement apartments, built in the fifties, okay? And I don't have to, I do not have to upgrade to an egress, right?
I can't answer that as well as.
It's
maybe-
written in here that it, in the year that it was built, conforming to when it was constructed, which they didn't have egress windows back in the
Is
fifties.
it a house, an apartment, or a house?
It's a two-story house with a basement apartment, I got two.
I would maybe refer that to Matt on the answer to that one.
And I think, I mentioned earlier, if it's a point where, you know, they've gotta go.
Could you speak up, please?
Sure. If it's an exit where they've gotta go, you know, there's no direct path to the exterior and they have to walk, 50 feet through the house, you know, they could be going through a place where there's fire and there's no way out for them. So I think, we're gonna say if something, is manifestly unsafe, we might request that it be changed. But if it's essentially safe, we're not gonna say that everything gets changed. There's a lot of older buildings that were code conforming at the time they were built, and we're not gonna automatically require updates to those, only if it's an inherently dangerous situation.
Right.
Back here?
I do have a question about the fees, cause you said that, there's a good chance that if the things go wide, it wouldn't be inspected for like 5 years, correct?
Well, it just depends
Yeah.
on how the program rolls out. It's gonna be once every 5 years, once a program, unless there's somehow we're alerted to a hazardous condition.
My question is then, we still have to pay that fee every year, even though it isn't even inspected once every 5
Your
years?
business licensing fee, but maybe I'll let Twyla answer that.
That's an annual licensing fee for the license and registration of the license for the property, correct?
Troy?
What is that fee going to cover? You know, we already paying, extra taxes.
Extra property taxes, that goes, yep, so the property taxes goes through the county and that gets distributed, the majority to the school, county, and then city. So
what is that fee being
the
used
fees
to
for this
cover?
program will help cover the cost of the inspection piece and the registration process and the administrative costs of
So
running.
is the problem that we don't have enough building inspectors, or what is the problem?
Well, the building inspectors, that would be for the building official, and the inspector handles the building permits on new construction and renovations. So this would be separate inspection related just to the residential rentals.
So we would have a building inspector just for residential, and that's what that fee is gonna go to pay?
That's what that'll cover. It won't be an employee for the city. It's contracted out through the Pierre Housing Authority.
Oh, yeah.
Thanks, Troy. You got a question right here?
On one of the things on the transfer of the licenses, I know it says that they can't transfer, but is there a way that if you were to sell one of your rental properties, that it could be prorated? Is that, you know, if you transferred it to somebody else? I don't know.
That's something we haven't had a question on and we haven't considered. So like if it's a single family unit dwelling, you're looking at a $35 annual, but if you're looking at, if you got a 20 apartment complex, it
Right.
might be a little bit more substantial.
Right.
And so that'd be what, $320.
Not that that's huge, but
Yeah,
just.
and that's, and we haven't talked about that, we haven't considered that, I don't know if we could get into that.
The way the existing business licenses are written, none of them are prorated, and none of them are transferable. So that just helps us have a new application, a new license for the new owners or the new business owner. Just because, you know, if it transfers over, we're less likely to get contact information from the new owners. So it kinda helps us with the existing license would just basically be terminated and the new applicant would come in as a new license. And the fees are typically not prorated. And I think that basically follows suit with most of the state licenses, and that's why they're written that way. Certainly there'd be an opportunity to have that conversation if we want these ones prorated.
Okay. I had another question too about the dwelling units. Like, so a two-family dwelling unit is one structure and 2 units. What about, like, we have condominiums that have 8 units
Are
or.
they attached?
They're all attached, but they all have separate entrances.
Yeah, no, that would be considered.
One dwelling?
The definition is one dwelling.
Okay.
with different units, if I'm correct. Yep, that's how that would be, that's how
Okay.
that would be looked at.
So how would you do it, like up on Abbey Road, the Abbey Road apartments, where some of those are owned by individuals and some of them are rented?
So you have.
So you have individual units that some are owned and they're rented out, and then some are owned by individuals, private property.
The private property, we couldn't get in, obviously, through this program. The dwelling rental would be still considered, if it's like if it's a two-family unit, you know, this one is an owner occupied, this one is not owner occupied, and it's being rented for income, then that would be the one, that would be just a single-family dwelling unit. That's how that would be looked at, because you can't, it doesn't cover the other piece to that, so. But I was gonna get back to your comment earlier, so those questions, those comments that you made, those are the types that we want you to share with your commissioners and stuff. Get a hold of them and share that, whether it's the public hearing or whatever the case is. You talked about, you know, focus on, you know, maybe the bad apples or whatever the case
Right.
is. Those are what we want you guys, now that we gave you information on this program, we want you to be able to take that, kind of understand the program a little bit better and share your concerns with the program, with your commissioners, and the commission, whether it's the public hearing or whether it's through other means. But that was the intent of this meeting for sure today. And does anybody have any questions that we didn't answer? We got one more back here.
How does this play with people that rent rooms during session to pages? Does, you know?
We consider that, it's still owner occupied, that home. So if they're renting a room at somebody's house, that is owner occupied home, that does not cover. If it's transient stay, such as a short time stay, those are considered, for a dwelling rental unit as
Like a
well.
bed and breakfast would not come under
No.
this?
No,
And then
those are-
how about commercial properties? Is that wrapped into this program?
No, commercial properties are not included. Good questions.
So what if I build an 8-plex unit and I live in one of them, now it's owner occupied?
One unit is, we'll stay out of here, please.
I'm just saying.
Yeah, so you know, there's a lot of what ifs, and I think it's a new proposed program, but we're trying to give you as much information as we can here. Troy, did you have another question?
I'll leave it.
You can catch my ear later, Troy.
I know.
So.
Come on,
I'm
Troy.
all about safety too, but it's,
So how many, to Jill's point, if it's a commercial property downtown and there's a rental unit on the second story.
Yes.
That would be included.
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to
Yeah,
clarify that.
yeah, because we do have some rentals, bulk businesses and stuff like that, and some high-risk areas in the city as
So it
well.
wouldn't be based on zoning, because we do have residential structures in commercial or, local business zoning. So if it's not gonna be based on
Right on
zoning, it's gonna
Main
be based on the use of the property.
Right on Main Street.
Yeah.
So question,
Yeah,
so, if this passes, and, if I'm new to Pierre, moving here, and I'm looking for a rental space, are these properties that have been inspected and passed and whatever, is there gonna be a list, is that
so
information gonna be shared?
I can answer that, kind of. So we have talked about that behind the scenes, and I think as we grow into the program, that's what we're hoping to see. So if, let's just say Matt, I mean, he's, new to Pierre in the last few years, he moves to Pierre, he's looking for a place to rent. We're hoping to have some type of database out there, because there really isn't anything right now, unless it's listed on a private website or something along those lines, but having to have a list of whatever's on the City of Pierre webpage or something, to where they can go in and they can have that information, whether it's a 10-plex or it's a single-family unit dwelling. We'd like to see that, we'd like to see it get to that point. I can't promise you that, but I think as we grow into the program, if it is adopted, I think that would be a huge benefit for folks moving to the city. And
But all the information will be public, so the only way that the records can be confidential is if it's specifically excluded in state law. So our records are open, so if somebody calls specifically about a property, if we don't have the listing out there available and they called specifically about a property, we would be able to tell them if they're licensed and that type of information. So that will be public information, even if it's not publicly displayed on the website until we get that mechanics up.
I got a question over here first.
So the inspections are gonna be done by the Pierre Housing, right?
Yes.
Okay, so what are the total costs that the city will be accruing from this new?
So we're looking as developing an MOU with the Pierre Housing and Redevelop and reimbursing them for their time that they put towards the inspections. They'll go out and do the inspections, but they don't have any enforcement authority. So if there is, I mean, they'll go out and visit with the agent or whatever the case is, and they'll do the inspections, and then they say it's all electronic based. They hit their tablet, they do a checklist and send it to the building officials, the building department. They review it, and then the license, I think, is issued based off of that. But the cost to that, and the enforcement side will come, if there is a need for an enforcement, it'll come from the city of Pierre, obviously. It wouldn't come from Pierre Housing and Redevelopment Commission. It would, that's separated.
So you just drew out these prices?
Based on other communities, yep, that we're seeing out there, yep. Yes, sir.
Approximately how many rental units are in Pierre, South Dakota?
Well, we don't have a solid number
Right.
today because we don't have a
An
program
estimate.
to collect that. But if I remember correctly, I wanted to say there was 1,600-ish. Does that sound right? But right now, we have to try to find them through the utilities, and the utilities have a process where, do you own or do you rent, and that's not always accurate, so.
1,600, give or take.
Yeah.
isn't this information public knowledge at the Hughes County Courthouse based on the owner occupancy?
Yeah, and we utilize that information as well. So, I mean, we realize we've got a lot of long-term rentals where they don't have identified who the landlord is. So we utilize the city records and the county records for not owner occupied. So, but I can tell you when I went through that, I found a few that I don't think are accurate. So you might want to check that because it's a higher tax rate,
So, sorry, I'm trying to understand this, and I come from the angle of, providing staff support to two different boards and councils serving people with disability. So I'm thinking in terms of safety, risk, accessibility and such. So inspector comes out, major finding, maybe it's egress window, something. And so if it's not fixed, it's not whatever, the landlord, manager person, they can be fined, yes?
So, yes, but no. So what happens is, let's say, it can, if things aren't remedied be in a proper time frame. So if our housing inspector goes out, they locate, okay, they got this window in this bedroom screwed shut, nobody's getting out if there's an incident. So what happens is that goes to the building department, they review that information, they contact the agent or the owner, and they say, hey, you know, you got this issue, let's work on a time frame to get this fixed. And there's a time frame given based on what the issue is, and it's a reasonable working back and forth, and then maybe come back in and you show, hey, look, we fixed it, like, perfect, and there's no fine. You're not fined right out of the gates.
So, there's the end for landlord and fixing. Is there any recourse or whatever outlined for tenant?
Not through this program.
Okay.
And it's easy for me to sit up here and say this, but a lot of times that's gotta be done through the lease that's drafted, obviously. We don't have much that we can do that. We've had people tell us that we need to go out and enforce this on the tenants and not the owners. Very difficult to do that, but through this program, it's not. So, I gotta take a question over here first.
Now, is this going to become where the tenant can run to you anytime they have a mouse or a broken window?
It's gotta be
anything, I mean, are you gonna be dealing
Are you
with
saying this is
tenants
gonna be a
that are unhappy
tattletale?
with their landlord?
No, because we know there's a lot of tenants that are gonna just like to complain at times as well, but some of them are pretty, they got some meat behind it as well. So, they're gonna be reviewed on an individual basis. There's a program developed on the internet where they can actually submit a complaint. It can be reviewed, and if it's a substantial complaint, there could be a follow-up. With the program's been, we don't see, I don't think it's a newer development on the webpage, we're not seeing it utilized much. It hasn't been commercialized that much or advertised that much either. So, to answer your question, no, if someone's got a little something going on, work with your landlord, do it, whatever, but we can't, there's no way we'd be able to, because we know there's a lot of people that like to tell, and.
It could become a real
And they're mad at you because you made them pay rent this month, so now they're gonna come back and say, hey, I saw an ant crawl across, or whatever the case is, so I just wanna make sure that, it is reviewed at the building official level. Matt, is that accurate?
It's true, and, if we get a complaint that has no validity, then we'll just simply say that this is not a valid complaint. There's no issue here that, it's an enforcement issue. If you don't like the color of the carpet, too bad.
Troy had the next one.
I have rental properties in Vermillion, and they currently have, this program in place, and the problem I have there is, like, I have houses with 5 college kids in there, and they all have locked doors in their house, and I have problems, with unlocking their doors to go in and check that their smoke detector's working. So literally, in my, perspective, I have to contact every one of those and have them there to help unlock that door for their privacy. And that's just what I've ran into with already this, this mandatory inspection, and they have it they inspect properties every year in Vermillion. And it needs to be, for the safety. The smoke detectors last until they need the remote in the back, in their chart, in their remotes for the TV or wherever, I don't know where they go, but they just vanish.
Those 10 years will help you in that regards, by the way, but it's not as solvable for the issues on those smoke detectors.
What was that?
The 10-year detectors, just kind of getting off track.
Are them electrically backed though?
No.
Vermillion mandatory that they're hardwired.
Oh, they do, so they go.
Yeah, so we had to go in and re-hardwire all the smoke detectors in Vermillion, cause that's what they made code.
Yeah, that'll only be required in newer construction here.
Don't they disable hardwired units?
They're able to take the units down and it doesn't set off all the units.
Yes.
But.
Do you have that happen?
And they do that all the time, and then we end up having to charge them for the new smoke detector when they move out, but it's.
Helmer, you had a
If
question?
they're getting irritated with it,
I guess
they
my
take
question
it apart or
is, if you
stop
got a
it.
house and you're renting it out as a 2-bedroom house, and you know that the basement's probably not livable, but they proceed to, over time, make it a livable space, how is that on me?
So,
And it's in the lease.
Yep, let me respond to that, and, we had the same question, yesterday, and Matt, I don't wanna talk, step on your toes here, but how that would be perceived by the building official, it might be relayed from Pierre Housing and Redevelopment, like, hey, basement, there's no way out. I mean, when Matt visits with you about that condition, he would be looking that you're making reasonable efforts to remedy the situation. You're not gonna come in there with the iron fist or anything like that, making reasonable, moves with that tenant to try to remedy that situation. And we know, you could have them pull out, they're gonna put 2 beds in 1 bedroom, and then when you leave, they're gonna drag that bed back down. I get it, that's the world, that's some of the times that the clientele were, that are in those places, where they just, throw safety to the side, but, I can tell you that there'll be reasonable efforts made, as long as reasonable efforts are being made, that's how that would be perceived. Mr. Smith?
So, did I hear you correctly that commercial spaces are gonna be excluded from this? It's just gonna be like residential rental units? I mean, I don't know, when I drive around Pierre, it looks like there's commercial storefronts that are a lot worse shape than the apartments in this town. So they're gonna be excluded from this, even though they're not owner occupied, is that what I understand?
Yeah, they are not included in this program.
Interesting.
Another question right back here.
My name is Dan Olson. I've been in the rental business for over 50 years. And one of the things we asked yesterday, how many complaints, did you get some time to get that information to give to us today?
No, we did not.
Okay, well, I appreciate that. I made a note of things, some things I'm not gonna ask because they were answered already. I guess I do have one question. What's the hurry here? What are we doing?
So-
The ordinance reading date, as I read, is before the month is done, July.
Yeah, so.
What are we doing?
So let me answer that one for you, Stan. So we visiting with the mayor, and not to speak on behalf of the mayor, he asked to push that date back to, because it was looking at July, and then with the feedback we're getting, they moved it back to July 27, but that's a moving date. If there's still a lot of information coming in,
Okay.
if you guys are reaching out to them.
You wanted an objective date to work toward.
Yeah.
Okay,
So that's
I hear you.
I can't
Thank
say
you.
that that's the date, that's a date.
So that is reason for the timeline you have, correct?
Yeah.
So if you do approve it, when would you implement it?
So that would be the implementation of this. I might let Twyla answer that.
Yeah, so
27th of
when it
July.
goes through the commission, it'll require, first and second reading, so we'll typically do the public hearing at the first reading, because if there's any modifications to the ordinance, it can't be given second reading after it's modified. And so once it would be adopted, we would anticipate, in about the middle of the year of this current 2021, we would hope to start reaching out and sending notifications and get the registration process started, and hopefully have most of it completed by the end of November, December. That way we have our whole population to pull for the inspections that would be completed in 2022. So that, gives us hopefully plenty of time to reach out, get notifications out, and get the registration process complete by the end of this calendar year.
Do you have any idea of the money we have invested in here in this housing? Somewhere between 100 and 150 million or more. Now, the thing I want to share with you is this. I've been in a go-around of the city before. I'm a strong-willed person, and I will not roll over easy. So it's my intention, whatever happens here, I have situations that happened where fee was put on me. And guess what happened to fee? In a year or two it doubled. So these fees are not fixed. And so I see the alarm of what can take place. The regulations, I've dealt with the federal government because I had a loan for my 8-plex I built. And I know what they did. They told me I could not pay that loan off before it was due. Can you imagine not being able to have the money to pay it off, not doing so? And I told them, well, I can. And you know how I forced them to let me pay it off? I told them we can do this gracefully or however is necessary. but I got a system to have you take it, the money. I'll quit making payments, you gotta foreclose, I'll have a cashier's check waiting for you. So I'm just saying, I find this with agencies, the things that were told are gonna happen don't always work out like we planned. And they said, how do you find out about that? How did you were never given that information? You quit making payments. Well, I have a friend, I said, that has enough property, he figured it out through his attorney. So what I'm wanting to share today is this. I think we need safe housing. I don't question that whatsoever. I have one of my units with a retired attorney in it who refuses, although that individual signed an agreement I could come in and inspect the property to let me in the building. And an attorney feels they can enforce keeping me out. You know, we're almost up against some impossible situations. I had another issue where I went in to repair something. And the person said, why are you here? I said, because you asked me to come and fix this. I'm fixing it. And my young son, teenager, said, Daddy, don't we own this place? And she exploded and moved. Well, of course, I didn't care. But the thing I'm saying is, don't you have enough authority with what you have in place to take care of this without putting a whole new ordinance in place? That's my point. And I appreciate your answer that you've given us. I'm concerned that I was not even aware this is going on until I got a card earlier this week or last week, whenever it come, why we as the people owning these properties were not in the loop of helping to decide what we need to do to have safe housing, if that makes sense. I also know this, I'm observing legislation all over the nation, all over the country, that the name of the game is get it done quick before people know what you're doing, and you got it. And so I'm in the process of this thinking, we don't need to be in a hurry. I'm like Tom Maher said yet, there's no hurry. And probably my question is, do we really need to go to this extent?
Thank you for your comments. I had a question back here.
Yeah, if we're gonna start this in mid-year, it runs from January 1st to December 31st. Why not start it on the 1st of next year if you're going to do it?
Well, the registration process is gonna take a while, so once the ordinance gets through and gets published and is effective.
Okay, what I'm talking about is the fees. I mean, you can register, why would you have us pay for half a year?
No, so part of that registration and fees that are paid in 21 will cover you for the 22. That'll be the first licensed year will be 2022.
Okay, well, I just wanna make one other little comment. I've been invited to be on Pierre's and for Pierre's affordable housing groups time after time. And I just want to keep in mind that, you know, everything you add makes housing more unaffordable for renters. Just my comment.
Can I pick up on something that Joe and just Forrest talked about?
Go ahead.
And that was, you know, when I've been involved in the legislative process a lot of time, a long time at the state level. And frequently the most successful legislation involves stakeholders. You get them at the table before you do the bill, before you do the enactment, work on things, try and get something that at least has some buy-in of all parties concerned. That didn't happen here. This is just thrown at us.
And I appreciate that comment. We did have that comment yesterday as well.
I feel like that's why we're here.
This is not, this is already drafted, ready to roll. Don't tell me you have it on the ground floor because you haven't.
You had a question?
Isn't there fire code ordinance already in place in the city of Pierre?
Property maintenance.
Well, why don't they, that's my problem, is they're gonna pass another ordinance when they don't enforce the ordinances that are already on the books. So why in the hell hasn't somebody been out inspecting these properties prior to this? without having to license the rental houses. It looks to me like you're just trying to identify all the rentals.
I can answer that for you. So, when we work through our community resource officer and try to do these inspections, like let's say that an officer is in a residence and we notice something that's like a danger to life or to the property, we notify our building officials and we try to make arrangements with the owner of the property in order to do the inspections. When we do that, probably 60 or 70% of the time the owner doesn't show up. And then we continue to go down that process and go down that process and go down that process. When we do that, then we have to get involved into what we call an administrative warrant, which actually gets signed by a judge, and we have to go into, and it's not a search warrant per se, but it is because it's an administrative warrant done by our building officials, and we go in there and we have to do the inspection in that manner. This takes a lot of time, and during that time frame, none of this has been, the issue, the deficiency hasn't been addressed. So if we go through a process where we're actually licensing the dwelling, the rental property, we have an actual contact person which is within 50 miles, and we have a schedule set up to where the inspections can be done, as a part of the licensing process. We remove all that other away, and we can just work directly with the landlords. So this is actually a benefit for you guys as landlords to be able to say that, we do have inspections that are done. They're done independent of the city. They're done by trained professionals. And if there's ever a deficiency, we've addressed that. Now, yes, there is a fee. That fee can be $2 to $3 a month per unit when you break it actually down. But having sat in on some of these meetings and knowing that the goal behind this, it is not punishment or anything.
And the landlord doesn't get back to you, how long does it take for you to get that search warrant?
It's an administrative warrant, so there's a difference. The last one probably took a good 6 months. Yeah.
Okay.
6
And
months.
these
So the 3 that we've
properties-
actually done are administrative warrants. Now, there's more inspections that we've actually done throughout the year based upon complaints. I would have to go pull our records and go through that, but our CRO is quite busy with those things.
So we really don't see that, cause you're saying you're gonna get in a property every 5 years, and you're saying you've had 3 that you can think of that needed to go through that warrant thing that took 6 months. So the way you're doing it right now, if there's a problem, it's gonna get taken care of sooner, because if I have a property that's in poor condition, you're not gonna come and look at it for every 5 years.
Actually, it won't get taken, it won't be taken care of sooner, because if you're already registered as a property owner, then we know to contact you and we say, hey, that we have this problem, we're gonna need to send an inspector. You say, yes, that's fine, we meet together and we get that situation taken care of right away.
But.
Whereas where we do have, and I'm sure, I don't wanna, none of you in this room, but we do have property owners that just don't care. And some of the property that we've been into is, and Vonna can attest to this from her profession, and there are quality of life issues.
So what if they don't register?
There'll be remedies to that, and I don't wanna speak to those because.
But now, when a property transfers, the county does get the phone numbers, and the county does have people's addresses. So like, if you can't call them up, you can send a card to them.
We send certified letters, but they just don't show.
So this isn't gonna make people do anything, you know what I'm saying?
But it will.
As landowners, what is our legal right to open up that, dwelling and go in it?
Vonna, can you answer that?
It's been a while, but you do have legal rights to go in. It's your property, and I can't cite the law off the top of my head, but there's the landlord-tenant law through Consumer Affairs. You have the right to be in that unit.
But
And
can
at
we
the
do
very
it
least,
without
should
their
be in your
permission?
lease.
No.
I'm sorry, what?
We have to get their permission to do it.
24 hours.
You have to give them
24 hours,
notice,
I
and you have to have a fair reason. I mean,
That's
the
what
tenants-
I ran into in Vermillion. It took forever to get it into them dwellings, because they said, I don't want you in here.
Yeah, you have the right to be in
But,
there.
you know,
have to
then
have the private,
it just
it's
made
a
them
give and
mad.
take, because some landlords, I mean, I've seen the bad landlords that are literally in people's units every day doing things they shouldn't have to be doing. And so some of the laws are to protect the tenants from that, but if you have a reason to be in there, you have the right to be in there.
A reason, so the inspection's a reason. That we're gonna keep it to 5 years
Well,
and not every year like Vermillion?
If it's a problem, we're gonna be there more often than 5 years.
Right.
5 years is the one we go through, everything looks great, there's no reason to bother you.
And if you have a valid reason that you want an inspection done, contact us and we'll do that, but there's no charge to you for the inspection. The city pays the inspector, okay? The fee that you're paying for registering your dwellings most likely will not cover everything that the program is designed to do. So if you need to utilize the program to get into a residence in order, because you think that there's something going on, then use it. Don't use it for us, because then you become an agent of us and we don't do bad things. You know, that becomes a whole different aspect. But if it's a quality of life issue, utilize the program. That's what it's for.
Joy?
So 3 complaints out of 1,600 units, we just said.
No. 3 times this year we've had to
Yeah.
use an administrative warrant process.
Okay.
Now, those complaints were over and over and over again on the same property.
But you do have a process to take care of it already.
We do have a process, however, we're still not taking, it is a process. but-
Again, you can go to the tenant and say, hey, look, this isn't gonna happen for 6 months. You have an option, Mr. Tenant, of moving.
So the tenant always has an option of moving, but there's also the tenant that doesn't have anywhere to go other than where they are, and they're not gonna say anything. And that's the vast majority of the problems that we see, is that the tenant is living in substandard living conditions because they have no place else to go.
Again, the city has an opportunity to condemn that property also.
But we are kind of a reactive process right now where it's complaint driven. So if we don't hear the complaint or we don't get the invitation to come into that particular rental unit, then we don't know about it. We're not out driving around looking for the substandard rental units. We don't have the time availability to do that right now.
And is it your job to do if it's on the books, you have to, you're saying that you know these fines probably won't happen, maybe not, but your job is what you do, you have to enforce those.
We do. but
You
again,
can't
it's-
go, I'm gonna let this one go.
So the other part of this is that if this is an administrative fine per se, so it's a fee that's set forth in the city's schedule of fees, just like we charge $20 for fingerprinting. If we go through the other process of it, it becomes a criminal process where we actually have a violation of city ordinance, and this does not rise to that level.
Perfect.
So then we have to go through a judge, and then we have to go through all the other things, then we have to go through another process in order to abate a property.
Which is perfect,
It
because
is.
those people need that.
For the people who don't want to voluntarily comply. However, this is also another way to ensure that we have quality of life standards are being met, which is our ultimate goal in all of this.
Everybody's qualities are different.
Right, but people, Troy, you should see some of the places we've been into. People shouldn't live like that. You shouldn't live in a
Again, the
basement
city
apartment with
can
black
condemn
mold.
those
You
properties.
shouldn't walk into a house where, Vanna mentioned about the sink doesn't work. I went into a residence where there was no floor in the bathroom, but the only running water was in the bathroom. And there's babies in there and there's cockroaches in there.
Again,
And it's-
that's when the city
And it's a
can
rental,
condemn the property,
and it's in the
right?
city of Pierre, and having this program could have prevented that.
Was the property condemned?
The property's gone, yes. Yep.
Which the process worked.
The process,
But still, how many, there might be another one out there that we don't know about. If the inspection isn't done, how are we supposed to know about those?
If we don't
Just
get the.
because
How do
we
you know
found them
somebody's
because of a
personal
complaint
house
or
isn't
some
that
other,
way?
there still could be other those conditions out there just because we haven't gone through the process that we have today. That,
When the county does their assessment on taxes, can't you talk to the county and say, on the sheet it says, good, poor, you can go to the county and you can see what they feel the inside of the property's like.
do they go into the property every year?
No, and
No,
in fact,
they
they're
don't
probably
go in.
2
They
years
would have to
behind.
do
In
the
Hughes
inspection
County, they're
also.
behind because they haven't been doing them, so.
But
no.
your system's gonna be 5 years.
I don't know how often they do it. They're required to, but they don't, so I can't answer that.
if the 5-year time frame is too far, we can always readdress that, but it's a lot, the 5 years was set because 1,600 rental units, and in that amount of time, we can actually get everything inspected within 5 years, and then if we need to do it sooner, we can do it sooner. But if you just go, we're gonna do 1,600 rental unit inspections in 1 year, that's not feasible, and that's why there's an implementation part of it, so.
So is there any other further questions that we can address on the program here? Do you have one here?
I have one question on this agent. I'm from Rapid City, so I'm out of the 50 miles, and I have one house in Pierre.
Okay.
But I like to know what's going on.
Yep.
So as a landlord, I'd want to be notified, not an agent.
Okay.
Which would probably be my sister, who I don't want to bother them. So I don't know if that can be changed, where it doesn't sound like it. It doesn't sound like, it sounds like they would notify the agent.
The way the system works, both of the owner and the agent information it'll be parallel. So all the notifications will go to both.
Both?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
The reason for the 50 miles is if we have a problem that needs to be addressed now, you need somebody that's close enough to get there. And that's not gonna happen very often, but.
I can come pretty fast.
But again, that person
I did,
comes
yeah.
at an expense to the landlord. Right now, if I'm gone and there's a plumbing issue, I call my plumber. If I have an electrical issue, I call my electrician. I don't have to be here to take care of my properties.
Actually.
But you'd like to know what's going on.
You have to be
Which
licensed.
my renters
to
will let me
rental
know.
properties. You actually have to have a license to handle rental properties. So my sister can't really handle my property the way the law is written.
Correct.
Any other
Correct.
questions before we wrap this up, Mr. Smith?
I got one question, kinda goes back to over here, so if you guys get like numerous complaints about a particular property and you go in and do numerous inspections, you said that's all covered under your yearly fee, but I mean, is there a point where, you know, if you're in a property like once a month, is there a point where you're gonna have to charge some type of fee for going, you know, like if, say the tenant calls in a complaint about an electrical issue that doesn't exist.
So you're talking about unfounded complaints, or?
Well, yeah, or just, for example, if you guys have to go back to the same complex over and over and over and over and do an inspection, like say you go there like 8 times in a year. I mean, you know, eventually that licensing fee isn't gonna cover the expense of all them trips back to that particular complex.
So, not to speak for our building official, but our building official could be there to do the inspection, as far as that goes.
But I mean,
That's not-
time is money, you know, and
time
these
is
guys, I
money.
mean, you know, so that's why it's kinda,
To
that was
answer
my
your
question,
question,
is there, you know,
I can
is there
answer
a
that.
point where there's gonna be a fee for these
I think I can. answer that.
unnecessary inspections is what I call it?
Yeah, I hope I can answer that question, but there is no fee for our time to go back in and do that. What there is out there is if we're dealing with that property and we gave a reasonable time frame, maybe to correct an issue, and there's not reasonable efforts being made, then there could be a fee associated with that. But for us, just going and working with the owner, going in there, whether it's multiple times a year, that there is no additional fee for our time. It's just like, well, if we're getting 0 compliance, then we can tack on a little meat at the end of the day kind of deal. But there's reasonable time frames in there, reasonable efforts, all that good stuff, so.
Just like when we work with property owners on cleanup, you know, like I spoke to yesterday, we do everything we can to accommodate. You know, if you tell me it's gonna take you a month to clean something up, well, then it's gonna take you a month, and we're gonna readdress it after a month. And if you're
Right.
making substantial progress towards that, but you don't have it completely cleaned up, hey, can we get it done in another month, or what can we do to facilitate you by giving you dump tickets and things like that? Same concept, you can't get something apart right now, well, we understand that, or it's gonna take me 2 months to get an egress window put in, okay, well, we'll work with you on.
Well, that's what my question was, if there was gonna be, you know,
Yeah,
if you had,
you have to be willing, we have to be willing to work with each and every person here, because it has to be a partnership.
Do we have, do you want, you have
One more
something to say?
question right here.
And if it's a tenant complaining about something, we had somebody called about an apartment building, and they said that there was some smell that was giving them a headache, and they were convinced it was from the mechanical system. We went and took a look, we looked at the installation, everything was per the mechanical code, and their apartment was some distance from, you know, the exhaust vent for the furnace, you know, and we essentially told the occupant of this place is that there's nothing code-wise that's wrong with this place. I don't know what's causing your issues, but, you know, there's nothing we can do to cite the landlord for any issues, so. I mean, if we go to a place and we find that there's no issue with the building code, the mechanical code, or any of the other codes that we have, we'll make that point. You know, we'll say, you know, there's not a code issue here that we're gonna go after.
This gentleman in the black hat here?
Yeah, how are you gonna facilitate the manpower, and then do you see that, affecting building and development? 'Cause it sounds like you're putting a big workload on Matt's department.
So the inspection piece is gonna be handled by a third party through an MOU, so that's where a majority of the workload, that's the administrative side of scheduling and the inspections themselves. If there happens to be something significant that needs to be addressed, it falls into Matt's lab, and then that's divvied out between the staff up in that office. And that's how that workload is gonna be handled, and it should take care of it based on what we're kind of projecting, hence the 5 years kind of deal. That's why things are spread out a little bit to kind of see how that plays out. And then what was the second half of your question? I
Well,
apologize.
you see it, I mean, even though you have that third party, I caught that Pure Housing, but on the original back statement,
Sure.
it sounds like it's putting a big burden on Matt's department.
You know, I don't know if it is or not,
I
and I
think he's
guess.
talking about new construction, for your regular new construction
Yeah, 'cause he's
inspections.
already
Yeah.
wearing one.
Oh, so you're worried, you're
Yeah.
concerned about the delay in getting an
Yeah,
inspection done for.
I mean,
okay.
have you guys thought about other repercussions coming through besides what you're trying to put together here?
We're gonna do what we need to do to make sure that we cover his office and make sure that we get all of his regular duties done.
Okay.
So, I
Thank
think
you.
it's gonna, that's what they talked about, it's gonna be a little bit of time to kind of work through the issue, but, you know, we need to tweak some things with staffing and we'll do that.
So I see a lot of people walking out. What I'd like to remind everybody is, please share your thoughts, your likes and dislikes with the commission. That's where it's gonna land. We will stick around for a little bit here.